Welcome to week 2 of the tutorial for Vanessa's Merry Christmas Darling quilt that she designed for Moda from her Berry and Pine collection. Last week we did the letters, Merry Christmas Darling. This week we are going to be doing everything that surrounds those letters on the quilt. The flowers, the leaves, it's really going to be the most fun part. When you're working on the flowers on her quilts, you're going to work from back to front. So we're going to look at these flowers and these designs and see what looks like it's behind and what is coming forward. So the first thing that I see are the peach and the red flowers. And those are sitting behind the leaves that are going to go on top afterwards. So I'm working with my water-soluble glue stick. We are going to lay down the Chenille-It in sections in colors one at a time, working from back to front again, and put down the water-soluble glue stick first. We're going to start laying it down, just covering the edge of that design and following the design. And when you get to a dip like I did here, that's kind of a hard turn. So at that point we're going to flip it. Where we have curves, we can, because this is a 3/8 inch wide bias, it will mold and shape around those curves and just press things into place as you go. And we're coming up from a deep curve here. I'm just going to add an extra touch of glue there, flip it at the base and come around that curve, and you'll find that that's very easy to shape around the curves, unless you have a real definite dip, and then you're going to flip and come up around the next curve. And that will give your flowers definition. By doing those flips, that gives more definition and detail to the shape of the flower. And you'll realize that once it's washed and dried, how the little things like those flips are going to make a big difference in the way the quilts look. Got kind of a corner here, so I'm also going to flip that because I want the definition of that edge, just as she's designed it and added that to her panel. We don't want to take away at all from the original design. We're going to follow that as closely as possible. When I get to the end, I'm just going to cut that off right even with where the leaves are going to be. In this section of the panel I have 3 peach flowers, so I'm going to do all those at the same time. This is a smaller one. I'm going to add, I can add the chenille all the way around that all in one application of the glue stick and then lay it down. This is a smaller flower, so I'm going to try and let you see how I'm shaping that around. I'm working in a smaller area, so it's going to be a little more difficult to see, but you can see how I'm bringing it around the curves and flipping it where it comes down and dips into the flower until I get all the way around. I'll cut this off so I have an easier piece to work with and bring that around. But it's that easy and fast to just, we're basically outlining these flowers with the Chenille-It. We'll begin stitching down the Chenille-It on the outside of the peach flowers. One of the things that I want to point out here is you'll notice I have not changed my thread color from when I did the white letters. I'm still using just white thread. The thread color does not really matter when you're stitching down the Chenille-It. When this gets washed and bloomed, the thread is going to be completely covered. And at this point, it's nice to see the stitching because it kind of helps me see what I'm doing. So, again, stitching down the center of the bias, shorten stitch length, 1.5 to 2.0 stitch length. And I'm just taking my time coming around the curves because I want to come down into my needle is in the needle down position, so when I stop I can just lift that and turn it. I don't have to reposition my machine and start going the other direction. And you'll do a lot of stopping and turning as you go around the flowers because there's just a lot of detail here that we just want to make sure that we are able to follow the beautiful design and the shape of the flowers and outline those accurately so that'll really look perfect when it's washed and dried. Just coming around the curves. There are 3 different sizes of peach flowers on this panel, and we will do all of those first. Those are on the background behind the leaves. We're working from the back to the front on all of these designs. And the flower is behind where the leaves will be added on. And you'll see that when we go to apply the leaf detail. Come up to the end and back stitch. We're working on the centers of these peach flowers next. We're using the 3/8 red Chenille-It. I'm going to do this in a couple of steps. I'm going to go across the bottom, and then I'm going to have almost kind of a zigzag up here to create the top part of the center of this flower. So we'll start with, and that piece is kind of angled off, which is fine because that's the shape of the flower as well. Stitch that piece down first, and then I'm going to add a little glue stick so that I can go back and forth and continue from that same line. So I'm going to go down and zigzag back, flip to the top of that, and the bottom, flip again up to the top, and a final flip down to the center of the flower again. So you can see that, I mean, you're just outlining the center of that flower with the 3/8. The smaller flower is going to be a little bit of a zigzag, and we'll start at the bottom, flip, go up into the next little detail, flip, up into the next, so we've got 4 little, almost like little petals inside of the flower. Bring it back to the beginning and cut it off. This one I'm going to do in 3 different parts. I'm going to do my glue stick and do a zigzag here. Each flower has a little bit different detail in the center. which is part of Vanessa's talent to really add detail and depth to her quilts. They really have a lot of detail. And I'm just flipping that back and across the bottom and add a little more glue to the bottom to make sure that this all stays in place until and that's almost a little bit rounded, so I'm also going to shape that a little bit as I bring that around. I've got 3 pieces here that I'm going to actually do 3 separate pieces, but when I stitch it down I'll do one continuous line of stitching. So I'm going to lay these down and just cut them at the end. And I'm going to do that same piece technique with these other lines coming around. So these will actually be individual. This piece I might flip. Couple that you can kind of tell as you work around the quilt what's going to work. There really isn't a right or wrong way to work with chenille. You're going to find what really works best for you. And I find that you almost have to work with it as you go along. Here I can see that that naturally wants to flip. So I've got a V there. Just a natural V. And I've got another one right here. So I'll just lay this down and flip it and come back up. That's just a natural V, and then I'm going to continue off the edge of that last one and put one more strip over here again, because I want to follow the lines of the panel and the design as much as possible. On the red, it's almost nice to have that white thread on the machine because I can see where I've stitched, because there are areas that I want to go back over. I want to go back the other direction, and I just want to stitch down the same line of stitching. So that's easy to do when I've got a contrast thread. Then I can go back to where I'm going to turn and come up for my first zigzag in the center of this flower. And it's easy for me to see where I'm stitching down the center of the tape because of that contrasting thread, and it will not show when it's washed and dried. That's all going to disappear into the texture of the quilt. So I come down, needle down and turn, always staying in the center of the tape of the line that I'm doing. Back stitch, and I'm done. That center is finished. The small flower is just a zigzag all the way across. So the trickiest part is just keeping it turned to go the directions you need to go. So once I start going this direction, it's going to be a little bit, I'm going to come back down the same line of stitching, then turn it, go up, turn it, and come back on the same line of stitching till I get to the bottom of the next one. And you can see on my stitching that I'm pretty close to being on top of it. Don't have to be exact, but you don't want to, you do want to be as close as you can to the first line of stitching so that you get the maximum fluff from your chenille. You've got a lot of fabric there to work with, but just keep the area where you're working flat as you can. This is the last large peach flower, and it has a little bit more going on in the center of the flower, so we're going to, I want to be able to do this with as much as possible continuous line of stitching. So I will go up the first row and come back right on my first line of stitching, and then just stitch over to the center of the next one, and do the same thing with this. These were 3 separate pieces, so we're going to just go up and down each one, but we don't have to stop and cut our thread or do anything. They're right next to each other, so it's easy just to stitch across a couple of stitches and be ready to go up into the next piece as we work around the center. And here we're going to just stitch up to this zigzag piece. And you've got loops, so it's easy to catch things. Just pull things back down into place. And we'll start our zigzag around. Go up to the top of that piece. I'm going to just push this quilt through so I don't have quite so much fabric to manipulate as I go around these final turns. Come back around to where I started. And here I will actually cut my thread, because I don't really have a bridge to the next set of rows. So I will cut my top thread there. I'm not going to worry about the bobbin thread. And here again, we are working with straight lines, so I'm going to go up and down on this first one. Go back on the same row of stitching. We have just a few more to finish off. I'm going to start this one. This is going to be kind of the zigzag technique that we're going to go back and forth to finish up these last few petals on the inside of the center of this flower. And the centers of these flowers, I think, really add so much detail to the panel, because it just, the centers is what really makes the flowers bloom and give them life. So I'm going to go up and down these last 2 little pieces. I'll go up and back down the same line of stitching to the bottom. Come back up the center, back stitch, and that center is, all the centers are finished. Next we're going to do the red flowers, and they're very similar to the peach in technique, but again we're doing the flowers before the leaves because they're in the background. So let's start with this red flower. I'm using my glue stick. Don't work too far ahead with your glue stick because it really dries quickly. If you have a smaller flower, you can easily go around the flower in one application. But if you get, when we get to the leaves, you'll see that sometimes you need to do things a little bit at a time so that your glue stick doesn't dry out and it holds things in place. I'm going around my curve and I'm keeping this just a little bit beyond the edge of the flower petal and kind of pressing it in place as I go. You can see how I'm flipping it when I get to my point. I'm just going to flip that and hold it and bring it around. And when these upper curves, this is bias, you can just shape that, kind of look ahead to see where your petal is turning. Keep the shape of the flower. Flip. And bring that around. I want to be able to do the center at the same time as the outside petals when I'm at the machine. So I will go ahead and glue around these loops. I like to start on the bottom, not quite to the point, and bring that around. And this is just going to be flip and turn around the center of this flower, making sure that I'm covering all the edges and going past the point, going past the end. Kind of check that when you turn. And then when I make this last point, I can bring that back and overlap where I started. And start with my needle down and back stitch that just a couple of stitches. And I'm just stitching down the center of the tape. You can see that I haven't changed my thread color. I still have white thread in my machine from when I did the letters, and it actually helps see where you're going and making sure you're going down the center when you come up to these turns. Let your needle be down and then turn and go back up around the next petal. Take your time going around the petals because you want to stay in the middle of the tape, but you can see with my stitching that it's not perfect, and that doesn't matter because when it's washed and it blooms, you won't see any of this stitching, and you'll just have the texture of the chenille. So I'm just guiding it as I go through. When you're doing curved pieces like this, you're going to stitch a little bit slower. My needle's down and turn. I'm also kind of holding down the chenille where I flipped because when we get around here, you'll see where you're going to have times when the glue comes up on you a little bit. That's what's happened here. The glue isn't quite holding it. So I'm going to pull that over and hold it with my finger. And just hold it in place with my finger where the glue has already started to dry. Once the flowers are done, once you've outlined the petals and done the center, you can go back and do the leaves because that's going to be on top. This leaf we're doing outlining in black, and I'll start at the bottom, at the very bottom, and go up one side with your glue stick first. I'm going up to this leaf, come down, and just go as far as where it comes up to the flower. Start the chenille at the very bottom. Check and make sure you're just covering that edge. Press that in place. When you get up to the leaf, you're going to slightly turn. So hold it in place. And just follow the outline of that leaf to the top. And just as we did on the petals, you're just going to flip to turn that. You don't have to cut it. You just flip it. And it'll give you a nice soft turn on the top of that leaf. When you get down to the bottom of the leaf where it hits the stem, you'll flip it again. Come up the stem. And I'm going to flip it to go up to the flower. Here you can see there's a seam in the Chenille-It bias tape. That doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter if that's going up or down. There is not a right side or a wrong side to this tape. Back stitch that a little bit at the very beginning and just start stitching down the center of the tape. The leaves are really fun and fast to do. You have longer lines. You don't have all the turning that you did on the flowers and the centers. So it's a lot easier to work on these leaves and stems. And it goes really pretty quick. Come up to that point. Sometimes if I'm making a turn and I want a little more room, I'll just raise my foot a little bit, but still keeping the needle down, and it gives me a little more room to turn. You can see why we want to stitch this down before the quilt is quilted. You can apply all your Chenille-It. We get that question a lot. Do I put the chenille on before or after it's quilted? Before, because you want to be able to handle and manipulate this quilt top without the bulk of the batting, and you don't want to have that extra stitching on your quilting. I'll add all that extra stitching. We have a little bit of back and forth on the top because we have some curves. My needle down, turn it, take a little more time coming around these curves to stay in the center of your tape. A lot faster and easier to go down these stems. The other thing you'll notice, besides I haven't changed the color of the thread, is I'm using a shorter stitch length. I'm using a 2.0 stitch length so that when I stitch down the center of the tape, I'm catching all the fibers and all the threads. And you'll be able to wash and wash and wash this quilt, and it'll always stay beautiful. And I'm coming to where the bias tape was joined and just stitch right over that seam. On the leaves for the red flower, I'm going to do the stem a little bit differently. It's not quite as wide as the other stem, so it's just going to have one strip of bias up to the flower. So I'm putting that on first, and I'll just start down here at the bottom and run that all the way up to the flower, up to the top of the flower. And now I will go back and do my leaves. And I'm even going to get a little bit of glue right on top of my Chenille-It tape so that when I come back down, I can overlap that onto the tape and then come up and do my leaves. And you can see my glue stick is starting to get a little bit messy. So before I put any more glue onto the panel, I'm going to take a paper towel and just wipe off the top of this glue stick. I'm stitching up the center stem first. And get that in place, and then I can go back and do my leaves. Now I'll come back down and do this first big leaf. And I lapped over where it started on the stem so that everything is caught, all my fibers are caught, all the tape. Now when I get down to the bottom, I'm going to put my needle down right where my stem stitches are, because I'm going to turn this to go up to the other leaf without taking it out of the machine. And I'm just stitching right on top of my first row, stitching up the stem until I get to the leaf, and then I will, that helps, you don't have as much starting and stopping. And it doesn't matter if there's 1 or 2 rows of stitching on that tape. As long as you just stitch on top of the first row of stitching, it doesn't matter. I'm cutting a little bit of bias off for my gray stems. And these are a little wide, these stems are a little wider, so I'll be going up and down both sides of the wider part of the stem. Start on the left, put my glue on, and when I get up to the first stem that comes off to the side, I'll just go to the first little point and glue that far. Working up this side of the stem. When I get to the narrow part, I'm going to go right over the whole stem, and I'll go bring my glue up to the top so that I can do the longest one first, so I'm keeping this in one continuous piece that way. Come to the top and then just make a little bit of a pleat to turn and go around to the point, flip it, come around. I'm pressing that in place as I turn and shape it, and stop there. Then I will come back to the shorter one and put a little bit of glue on top of that tape so that I can lap it over and begin there and come around that point. Flip it and come back around. I'm shaping the curves and making a point at the top. And cut that. Starting at the bottom of the long gray stems, I'm just stitching up the center of the tape, and I'll stitch up one long tape stem first without going off to the side. I'll just, where it laps over, I just stitch right over that. All the way to the very top. Find the middle of that, come to the point, needle down, turn and come back down the other way. Very similar to working on the stems and leaves of the flowers, very similar. Stitch back on the same line of stitching. This leaf is super fast and fun to do. I'm doing the outside first. You can see that the stem comes over the top of the outside of the leaf, so I'm doing the edge of the leaf first. Pretty much do this in one application, just because it is straighter lines and fast. Start at the bottom. I've got my edge slanted just a little bit so that it laps over that stem. Come up the edge, flip, the very point, flip, and start coming down the other side. Just press that in place all the way down. Be careful that your points and your edges are covered, and that's all you have to do. Keep your panel flat. Flip it. And again, this will get cut at a little bit of an angle at the bottom. Last thing on this leaf is the veins up the center, the white veins. So we're going to start at the bottom all the way to the top. I pull it back just to make sure I'm going all the way to the top of the point. Now we're going to do these side veins, and these are fast and easy too, because I'm just going to do one at a time. I'm going to glue it down to where it flips and come back up the other side, and then lay that down. Lay it down to the center tape, flip it, bring it up the other side. I press that into place and I just pull that back enough to make sure I'm covering the end. When this is washed and dried, it is going to give so much dimension to all of these elements and make everything just come alive. I'm doing the same with my stitching as I did with the glue, and stitching the center vein all the way to the top before doing the sides. You can see as I'm going up the center vein that my foot is catching on the panel, and that's because I've been doing so many leaves and flowers, and I'm getting a little bit of the glue stick on the bottom of my presser foot. So if that happens, just lift up your presser foot to release it and then go back down, and you'll just have to until I finish this one element, I'll just be careful and kind of pull my fabric through a little bit, and then when I get to the end, I will take a wipe and just wipe the bottom of my presser foot so that it doesn't catch on the glue. All the Chenille-It is now on the top of the quilt panel. We've done all the letters. Merry Christmas, Darling is finished. All the flowers and leaves and beautiful petals around the center of the quilt have all been applied with the Chenille-It. And next we will be doing the quilting. So next the top will be layered with the batting and batting. And our next episode will show you how to quilt your quilt.